Hey, what you reading for?
Adam Nevill is one of my favorite horror writers working today. My favorite, actually. And when I find an author that I love, I get a bit compulsive about it. I have to read all their books. I also get a bit compulsive about lists. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to rank all of Adam Nevill's books from my least favorite to my absolute favorite. The timing for this video is excellent because Adam Nevill has a new book coming out, All the Fiends of Hell. It is slated for an April release, but I have been extremely privileged to receive an advanced copy of the book. I've read it, I love it, but I'm not going to include it in this video ranking. I feel that when Adam Nevill comes out with a new book, that's an event and it deserves its own video. So when the publication date nears, I'll put out my video review of that book. Also, I will be interviewing Adam Nevill for this channel about his work, about his new book, and about his writing process in general. That is coming soon. So if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. There are a lot of exciting things happening with this channel, and that is all due to the growth and the support that you have been giving me, and I greatly appreciate it. Adam Nevill's books used to be put out by PS Publishing and then Pan Macmillan, but a few years ago he went away from traditional publishing and started putting out his books on his own. I'm not sure why he did that when he was enjoying success with traditional publishing. That is definitely something I'm going to ask him about. So if you visit his website, there you can see his catalog and you can get free ebooks. He has some short story collections that he's giving away. I don't know for how long. But if you've never read an Adam Nevill book before, you can test the waters with some short story collections. Or if you want to dive in with a novel, hopefully the ranking I'm going to do is going to give you a better sense of which book is right for you to start with. My guess is that if you read one, you'll probably end up reading several, assuming you are a confirmed horror fan. Adam Nevill writes serious horror for confirmed horror fans, not for horror tourists. You know, the type, they come in droves around Halloween. Let's spend a week in the horror universe. You know, nothing wrong with horror tourists. We can't all live in the darkness year round. But with few exceptions that I'll get into during the ranking, I don't think that Adam Nevill is the right read for the uninitiated in horror, the horror newbie or the horror tourist, if you will. It's not that his books are especially graphic or gory. What you get from an Adam Nevill horror is you get a combination of supernatural horror and the horror that comes from the depravity and cruelty of our fellow humans. The characters he writes for are well fleshed out, relatable adults who make reasonable decisions, and they pay a heavy price for those decisions. The characters he writes for feel real. The worlds he creates feel lived in, and you get an immersive and engrossing, gripping, and often legitimately scary horror experience that is perhaps best for the initiated already in horror. For the horror tourist who likes cutesy horror with teenagers making references to pop horror movies, and the author focusing more on showing you how clever they are rather than focusing on story or character. There's plenty of that out there, and some of it's quite good, actually, for what it is. This is not that. This is a different horror experience. This is Adam Nevill, a very different, unique experience for adult fans of horror. Not counting his short story collections, Adam Nevill has put out 11 books. Before I go into my ranking, let's take a look at these 11 books with their cool cover art in chronological order according to their date of publication. I've prepared a short montage featuring the music of the great Estonian composer Lepo Sumera. Enjoy the montage. I'll see you on the other side to rank the 11 novels of one of the best horror writers working today. Of the 11 Adam Nevill novels, there's really only one that didn't work on me. It's certainly not a bad book, but for reasons I'll get into in a bit, it just didn't land with me. So that book will start off the ranking. The other 10 I really liked to varying degrees, so this was a tough ranking for me to do. But starting us off at number 11 is Under a Watchful Eye from 2017, his 8th book. Even though this book didn't quite work for me, there is still a lot to like here. The protagonist is a horror writer. I'm a horror writer. He lives in a small touristy seaside town. I live in a small touristy seaside town. When he's out and about, he sees these creepy humanoid apparitions. When I'm in town, I am constantly running into German tourists. So immediately there was a lot to like. It was a relatable setup for me. The lore that introduces the horror is pretty cool. It centers around an obscure horror writer who started a cult that focuses on astral projections. And some of these participants, these cult members, they have a difficult time returning from their astral projection experiences. Frequently, what you'll come across in an Adam Nevill book is you'll get these characters who are misfits or on the marge of society, and they will experiment with dark ancient forces. And these characters, they get worn down from the experience. They are physically, emotionally, psychologically eroded from the repeated contact with the darkness they are exploring. And this is done very well here in Under a Watchful Eye. The reason this one didn't quite work for me, although it's well written and has unique and compelling horror elements to it, but the protagonist, he's being bullied. And I hate bullies. I loathe me a bully, right? And this protagonist, he won't fight back. He won't stand up for himself. So I'm reading the book and I'm yelling at him. I'm like, fight back, stand up for yourself. You know? But he didn't listen to me. It's hard for me to get into a story or to get behind a protagonist who just lets himself be walked all over. It took him far too long, I thought, for him to finally stand up for himself and fight back. It was a frustrating read for me for that reason. Also, I have a physical copy of the book, so this was my beach read for the summer. Perhaps not the ideal conditions for experiencing an Adam Nevill book, which may contribute to why it didn't quite work for me. But I would take it to the beach, I'd read a few pages, then I'd go in for a swim, come out, read a few more pages while I was being dried out by the sun. Perhaps not what the author had in mind for the way to consume his work. I don't know. Even though I didn't love the book, I recognize that it's a well-written, compelling, and inventive story. So I don't want to talk you out of experiencing it. Lots of people loved it, and understandably so. So here is a glimpse at what other readers had to say about Under a Watchful Eye. Under a Watchful Eye is a rarity among horror novels, delivering a perfectly executed 1-2 punch of psychological and supernatural horror while keeping the tension garrote taut from cover to cover. Also, if Scientology had been invented by Lovecraft rather than Hubbard, this could be his Dianetics. Recommended for fans of the skillfully written, weird, and creepy. This will haunt me for the foreseeable future. Next, coming in at number 10 is a bit of a controversial pick because it's a really good book, one that I liked a lot. It just figures so low on this list because I like his other books more. It's just weird that it figures so low. But coming in at number 10 is Last Days from 2012, his 4th book. Last Days won the August Derleth Award for Best Horror Novel of the Year. A lot of people love this book. I did too. I like his other books better. Last Days features a cult. I love cults. This cult, they contact and they raise an ancient force, which goes very badly for them. The way the horror is revealed, often in an Adam Nevill book, is it will surface not all at once, but in wisps or suggestions and progressively become more and more substantial. And his descriptions of the horror and the way the horror is revealed are excellent. And I think Last Days is a very good example of this technique that he uses. The story is set mainly in England, but we also go to France, to the French countryside. We go to Antwerp, Belgium, and we go to Los Angeles, in the US. And I think that's one of the strengths of this book, is that he makes very good use of these locations. I particularly liked the scene in Antwerp where the protagonist visits a private collection of some gruesome, macabre art. Also, the scene in the French countryside was very good. A lot of tension, very well done. As good as this book is, the reason why it doesn't figure higher in my ranking is because the protagonist is a documentary filmmaker. So often he will have a camera between him and the action, and it served as another layer of distance for me, the reader, from the action. I wanted the protagonist to experience the horror rather than document it. I did get that in the final act, but I'm greedy and I want that for the whole book. And come to think of it, a documentary filmmaker or a photographer, I think, at least for me as a reader, I don't think that makes a very good protagonist for a horror book. In fact, I can't think of a single instance where that has worked on me. Perhaps you can think of an example with a photographer or a filmmaker as a protagonist that works in horror. And if you do, please let me know about it in the comment section. I thought about it for a while and I couldn't think of any. It just creates another layer of distance for me. Also, the final act, which is done very well, it's got lots of action, great description. But it was just kind of short. They're in California and I wanted them to spend more time there, and I could have read another 15 or 20 pages of it, but it happened a little too quickly for me. I know of at least one viewer of this channel who told me that Last Days was her favorite Adam Nevill book, and that's not surprising. There is a lot to like here. The lore behind the horror is super interesting. There's also a mystery aspect regarding the true motivations of the filmmaker's employer that works really well. The descriptions are beautiful, it makes great use of international locations. There's a lot to like here. It's just that the camera that the protagonist had just separated me from the horror more than I would have liked. At number 9, The Vessel from 2022, his 11th book, his most recent book. You ever had this experience where you see a friend, a good friend, and they've got they got a new haircut and they're wearing clothes a very different fashion from what you're used to, and you're like, whoa, why'd you cut your hair? Your hair was great, and why'd you change your clothes? You had great clothes, you know? It's still your friend. You still go out and you have a great time, but at first sight, it's a bit of a shock, right? This is the experience that I had reading The Vessel. This is a different experience from Adam Nevill than I'm used to, or that I was expecting. Firstly, it's quite short. It's about 180 pages. Usually with Adam Nevill, you get a big substantive novel that's quite immersive. This is a short, quick read. The chapters are short, the passages are short, the sentences are short. Also, this is one of 3 books that was originally a screenplay that he then reworked into a novel form. And this one is probably, of the 3, the one that it's more evident that it was initially a screenplay. The Vessel is a focused narrative, which I love. There are a few characters, and most of the action takes place in a single location, so very focused. I really appreciated that. And I love when there's an author who I admire and they explore new possibilities and they try to expand the reach of their talents. I love that, and I love the story and love the characters in this book. It's just that I love the old haircut, with the old clothes. So I had to adjust my expectations going into the vessel. The story centers around a single mother. She works as a caregiver for an elderly woman who may or may not be as feeble as her appearance would suggest. This single mother, she can't find anyone to look after her daughter, her young adolescent daughter, during the night shift. So she brings her daughter with her to the home of this ill elderly woman that she's meant to care for. The elderly lady takes a liking to the daughter, and craziness ensues. Great story, great characters. I think it would make a great movie. It's just shorter than I want from an Adam Nevill book, so it can't rank any higher than number 9. Coming in at number 8, Banquet for the Damned from 2004, his first book. Again, this is a book that I really liked. It's crazy that it's so low, but I love when I find an author that I really like and I find them later in their career, then I get to go back and discover their debut work, their debut novel, with already an understanding of the greatness that they would achieve. That's a fun experience for me. For example, in Adam Nevill's debut, this was my third experience with his work, and I was already a confirmed fan. And with his debut, I was able to see some of the staples that would go on to define the uniqueness of his writing and his storytelling. But these attributes weren't as fully realized yet as they would be later on. And this was a fun experience for me. As a horror writer myself, I love seeing how a great writer would get better and better the more they write. It's logical, this kind of progression, but seeing it as a reader, I find it encouraging and it motivates me to keep working on my craft. Banquet for the Damned is set in a small university town in Scotland. I loved the location. A university professor, Elliot Coldwell, wrote a book about the occult, and he invites his superfan, this rudderless rocker named Dante. He invites him to the university to help him work on his second novel, or his second book. So when Dante arrives at this small university town, he gets the sense that this professor isn't quite lucid. Something strange is afoot. And the people in this small university town, they are experiencing night terrors. There have been some disappearances recently. Banquet for the Damned might be Adam Nevill's most gothic-flavored novel. Already we see some elements that he would revisit later on, such as the seedy, gritty, grimy side of rock and roll, someone's foray into the occult that turns into an obsession that eats away at them and breaks them down mentally and physically. We see ancient things resurfacing that the modern world is ill-equipped to comprehend, much less face. We also have a sexy goth secretary, which was fun. I was reminded of Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. As in Hill House, here we have a protagonist that sets off for a new experience, one that they don't really understand and that they are not prepared for, yet they go into this new experience with unwarranted optimism. It's the more charming side of naivete. And I love that character. I love that premise. I am frequently going into new experiences that I know little about and I'm not prepared for, and I frequently go into them with unwarranted optimism. So I can identify with this premise. There's a nice gothic atmosphere in this book. The build-up is slow and it has a very strong payoff. I love the final act, lots of tension, lots of action, very well done. A very strong debut, and it comes in at number 8. A high recommendation for fans of gothic horror that unfolds in an old school university setting. At number 7, Cunning Folk from 2021, his 10th novel. Now, this story centers around a young couple who are already having a hard go of things in life. This young couple with their young 4-year-old daughter, they scrap and save to buy a house in the countryside, a house that is in desperate need of repair. Unfortunately for this young family, they have the worst neighbors. This was a very tense read for me. I have had my share of neighbors from hell, so this story hit quite close to home for me, no pun intended. But the husband, Tom, he wastes no time standing up for himself, and things escalate quickly. Unfortunately for Tom, they escalate in a very bad way. So I'm reading this book very tense, grinding my teeth as I read it, but the pacing was such that I was able to angry read my way through it. It was not an easy one. Cunning Folk is another example of Adam Nevill's screenplays that he turned into a novel. And this is apparent in the ending, because the ending has a very movie-like ending, which I liked. It worked on me. The supernatural elements take on a pagan or folk horror vibe, which was fun. It's probably his witchiest, most folk horror-y book. But it's ultimately the story of a man's crumbling sanity and desperate acts as his hold on life slips through his fingers. It was a tough one to read, I'll be honest with you. But now that I finished with it, I can breathe easy now, and I can look back on the experience with fond memories. Coming in at number 6, No One Gets Out Alive from 2014. This was his 6th book, also winner of the August Derleth Award for Best Horror Novel of the Year. Now, this was my 7th experience with Adam Nevill's work, so it should not have caught me by surprise. I should have been prepared for it. And as I do before I read any of Adam Nevill's work, I did my breathing exercises, I did my neck rolls, I did my shoulder rolls to prepare for the tension. I am a responsible Adam Nevill reader. But my goodness. We get 2 or 3 pages where we are introduced to the protagonist, a young girl straight out of university, I believe. She's having a tough go of things. Recently thrown out of her home, recently broken up with her boyfriend. She does not have many options available to her. Then she is immediately placed in a very precarious and horrific situation. And with each turn of the page, the stranglehold on her gets tighter and tighter. The prospects of her escape get slimmer and slimmer. And meanwhile, I am supposed to be reading this and breathing at the same time. I'm no wizard. That's a tough ask. Apparently, there is a Netflix adaptation of this book. I can't believe they made a movie out of this book. I haven't seen it. I survived the book. I'm not going to push my luck and try to watch the movie too. And it's not a short book. Eventually, the protagonist gets to fight back, but you have to go through a lot with her before that time comes. I think one of the reasons why I enjoy reading horror is that it gives me the opportunity to face evil, face threats and danger, and stare it down, and it tests my nerves, it tests my resolve, and when I survive, I come through it on the other side. It gives me a boost of confidence. I feel like I can face anything, right? I think that's one of the positive aspects of horror, and that's what makes it worthwhile. I didn't exactly have a fun experience with No One Gets Out Alive, but I survived it. Okay, yes, I had to get up after every 5 or 6 pages, walk around, do some breathing exercises, do some stretching, yes, but I read every page. Now, this book won the August Derleth Award for Best Horror Novel of the Year. I should win an award for surviving it. It's not that it's hypergraphic or exploitative. What it is that Adam Nevill writes characters that feel very very real. The world feels very lived in. These characters, they make reasonable decisions that you can relate to, and they pay a high price for them. And even with the supernatural elements, I mean, the writing is so good, I don't have to suspend my disbelief, and it's easy to get sucked in. Not exactly what I would call a fun experience, more like a harrowing one. Um, no One Gets Out Alive, high recommendation, but for confirmed horror fans only. Can't believe there's a Netflix movie for this. What? Moving on. At number 5, we have Lost Girl from 2015, his 7th novel. Lost Girl is set some 30 some years in the future, where climate disasters create upheaval, mass migration, floods, famines, war over water, that sort of thing. And in all this chaos, crime and organized crime have taken on greater proportions. A man has his adolescent daughter taken, snatched right from the front lawn of their home. So he goes on a vigilante spree through the criminal underground in an effort to try to find his daughter, or at the very least kill those responsible for taking her. As dark and grim as that sounds, there is a supernatural element to it that is even darker. Lost Girl is Adam Nevill's most action-packed book, and it's the only one set in the future, so it is a bit of a departure for him, but it is still a recognizable Adam Nevill horror. Despite the grim subject matter of human trafficking, he never crosses the line. He never goes over the edge for me. He takes me to the edge, grabs me by the ankles and dangles me over the edge, but he doesn't take me over the edge, doesn't cross that line to get me to a point where I can't read anymore. I don't have the stomach for that kind of thing, for like sexual violence and violence against children. So he's able to ramp up the tension and make it take me to some dark places, but he never crosses the line of being exploitative or anything like that, which is good. If you like your horror more on the action-packed side, give Lost Girl a go. It's a tense page turner. At number 4, we have Apartment 16 from 2010, his second book. I am not a fan of haunted house stories, ghosts, traditional ghosts. They never work on me. I just find them silly and uncreative. But I do love me a sentient house or a sentient building, a building with a presence, a building with agency and an agenda. In Apartment 16, we have a building in London, and one of the occupants of this building is a painter who calls upon dark ancient forces for inspiration. Things do not go well for him. And this dark ancient force continues to have an effect on the building. In fact, the other occupants, when they try to leave because of the heavy oppressive atmosphere, the further they get away from the building, the more disoriented they become. They don't remember why they left. They don't remember where they're going. And so they have to return to the building. There is another young painter who gets a taste of what the building can offer, and he spirals into a dark, destructive obsession, otherwise known as inspiration. Our protagonist is an American woman, the first the only American character, I think, that Adam Nevill has created. And she inherits an apartment in this building. So she goes to London to either live there or try to sell it. For readers who want to check out Adam Nevill but don't have a lot of experience reading horror and think that his books might be too scary for them, good instinct, they might be. I think that Apartment 16 would be a great place to start. It's not a haunted house, a classic haunted house story, not by any stretch, but there is enough familiar territory in here. This is a more accessible book, I think, for that kind of reader. And for confirmed Adam Nevill fans, this is a recognizable Adam Nevill horror book, and I think that reader would enjoy this one as well. In fact, I am a confirmed Adam Nevill fan, and I have this ranked at number 4 of all his books. So a high recommendation for the uninitiated and the initiated. At number 3, House of Small Shadows from 2013, his 5th book. Now, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love a focused narration. Love it. In House of Small Shadows, most of the action takes place in a single location, the titular house, and we have few characters, 4 characters, the protagonist, antagonist, and 2 ancillary characters. Other characters are referenced or recollected, but essentially this is a very focused narration, which makes for an immersive and gripping read. The protagonist, she is a sort of appraiser, cataloging and appraising rare works to sell at auction. And she is given the chance of a lifetime in terms of her career when she is sent on assignment to catalog the works of the late, great M.H. Mason. So she goes to this house where the works are stored and being looked after by the artist's niece and her caregiver. And this M.H. Mason character, he created dioramas of war scenes featuring taxidermied rats. He also created creepy porcelain dolls, that sort of thing. The descriptions are fantastic. We are given a tour of his gruesome and macabre works, and all that is done very well. What makes this book particularly effective and scary too is that the protagonist, she realizes quite early too that something is not quite right with the house. And so as her understanding of the house's agenda becomes clearer, that provides scares, she tries to get away and encounters obstacle that adds another layer to the scares. And there is a part of her that she hadn't explored, a part of her that finds the danger she's facing appealing, attractive. And so when the horror comes from inside of us, when there's a part of us that's faced with the danger and is attracted to it, that adds a whole nother layer of psychological horror that makes this very effective, very interesting for me. This book worked on me on many levels. I found it legit scary. The descriptions are gorgeous. The lure of the house and the house's agenda is very interesting and inventive. A high recommendation. I had a blast with this book. Now there are only 2 books left, and coming in at number 2 is The Ritual from 2011, his 3rd book, also winner of the August Derleth Award for Best Horror Novel of the Year. The Ritual is probably his most famous, most popular book. There was a movie adaptation made of it, which undoubtedly contributed to the book's popularity. We'll get to the movie adaptation in a bit. The story is set in Sweden. 4 friends from university, they have a sort of reunion, so they decide to go to Sweden to go on a hiking expedition. There is immediate tension because These four friends, they have grown apart since university, so that adds an interesting dynamic to the group. They're hiking, and they decide to take a shortcut, step off the trail, and cut through the forest to get to their destination sooner. And that is a very bad idea. There's an old adage when telling a monster story or a monster movie, and that is less is more. Do not reveal too much of the monster or the beast too early, and that builds the tension and it makes for a bigger payoff at the end. Think Alien or Jaws. And that technique is used to great effect here in The Ritual. At first, we only see the results of the beast or the monster's passage, which gets our imagination spinning. Later, we get glimpses and we hear the beast, and it's only in the final act where the beast is revealed, and it's quite powerful and done very well. The whole book is expertly written and expertly paced. Again, the characters aren't necessarily likable, but they're believable and relatable. What's particularly interesting and effective about The Ritual is that we are given a tense, well-written, gripping horror story. And as we crescendo to the climax, we are then given a second expertly written, tense, page-turning horror, almost like The Ritual 2. It's a different story, related to the first, but a different source for the horror. I can't think of any book or movie that has used this technique of storytelling, at least not to this great of an effect. And it's still a tight, well-paced book that comes in at under 420 pages. I was given spots dispersed throughout the book, spots where I could catch my breath, but the tension and the scares mount progressively. And I think the second half of the book is even better than the first. I was very impressed with this book. I had a blast with it. It was a hit for a reason. I did try to watch the movie. I made it about halfway through before I gave up on it. I love when a creative person, a screenwriter or a director, when they take great source material and they try to do something different with it, give it a twist, add their own creative flair to it, maybe take it in a slightly different direction. I'm all in favor of that. And as I'm watching this movie, I can recognize that it's well done. The cinematography is very good, the acting is very good, but it's not exactly the same story as the book. There are some slight changes, and I was just growing progressively more and more frustrated because it's not the same thing as the book. It's not as good as the book, and despite what I believe philosophically, I was frustrated because I wanted an adaptation of the book. So about halfway through, I finally gave up. It just made me want to read the book again. So maybe the movie is great. I've heard good things about it, but I don't know. It's not as good as the book. I'm not much of a cinephile anyway. So if you've never read Adam Nevill before and you are a confirmed horror reader, which seems contradictory, regardless, I think that The Ritual would be a great place to start. I think that would be a great book to have your first Adam Nevill experience with. It's probably his most famous, and it's excellent. But it is not my favorite Adam Nevill book. That distinction for the #1 spot in my ranking, we have The Reddening from 2019, his 9th book, also winner of the August Derleth Award for Best Horror Novel of the Year. It's worth noting that The Reddening was my first Adam Nevill experience, which may account for its being placed on the top spot of my ranking. The first is always special, or usually special. It was my first Adam Nevill experience, and it was a game changer. I was blown away. I did not know that horror like this was being created. I'll be honest with you, back when I read it back in 2019, I was feeling a bit disgruntled with the horror community. A lot of horror that is being put out is targeted to younger readers. There is a cute, fun aspect to it, which is fine. But I also feel that there is an aspect of horror that should be challenging. My earliest experiences with horror were with Edgar Allan Poe and then Clive Barker. So, what appealed to me about horror was its subversiveness, how it challenges the reader, and its literary quality. And I feel like those aspects have been largely ignored in recent decades. Not entirely ignored, obviously, but largely ignored. In fact, aside from Clive Barker and a few rare exceptions, I was getting the feeling that as a reader, I was being neglected or even forgotten by the horror community. And then I read The Reddening. I was so happy. Serious horror for adults with high literary quality. This book breathed new life into my passion for horror at a time when I badly needed it. So this book holds a special place in my darkened heart. And it is hands down the scariest book I have ever read. In The Reddening, we have many staples of an Adam Nevill book. We have the grimy, seedier side of rock and roll. We have ancient things resurfacing thanks to a cult-like group of misfits meddling where they should not be meddling. We have believable yet flawed characters making believable decisions, then paying a high price for those decisions. For horror fans, this book has a lot to offer. It has a cult. I love cults. There is a grotesque, beast-like entity. There is danger coming from supernatural elements, but perhaps an even greater threat coming from the people encountered along the way. There is also a passage about archaeology, which I found fascinating. It had my imagination racing. Loved this book, The Reddening. And I was not the only one to love this book. It won the August Derleth Award for Best Horror Novel of the Year, the fourth time Adam Nevill would win this award in the award's 11 years existence. So there you have it, my ranking of the 11 novels of one of my favorite horror writers working today. If you enjoyed this ranking, I have a few other rankings of authors' catalogs. There's one for Catriona Award, Clive Barker, Shirley Jackson, Ira Levin. If any of those sound appealing to you, check them out in the playlist author rankings. If you've never read Adam Nevill before and you are a confirmed horror reader, I would suggest starting with The Ritual, but really you could start your journey anywhere. I started with The Reddening. If you've never read Adam Nevill before, but you only occasionally dabble in horror, perhaps a better place to start would be one of his more accessible books, like Apartment 16 or The Vessel. If you have read Adam Nevill and you're looking for your next Adam Nevill experience, I hope that this ranking was useful to you in helping you pick out your next Adam Nevill read. I would love to hear about your experiences with this author. What books of his have you read? What is your favorite book of his? Are you excited about his new book coming out, All the Fiends of Hell? You should be. It's very good. Are you excited that he's going to come on this channel and talk with me about his books and about his creative process? I am very excited about that. I'll leave a link in the description box to his website. Go check it out. Get yourself a free ebook. Buy a book too while you're there. And if you survive reading Adam Nevill and are looking for significantly less scary horror, I'll encourage you to check out my work as well. I have 4 books out. Psychological horror, tongue-in-cheek horror fables, and some more literary dark fiction. Obviously, you won't find that on Adam Nevill's website, but wherever you get your books, check it out. If you do read Adam Nevill, or my work for that matter, please remember that authors rely heavily on reader reviews. So get yourself some books, enjoy them, and leave a review. It's much appreciated. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I look forward to reading your comments. Thank you for watching. I'll see you at the next video.